Rain drummed lightly upon the tall windows of Madame Ellery's tea salon, turning the pale morning into a watercolor wash of greys and silvers. London society gathered there as though it were a stage, each guest performing refinement with delicate cups and rehearsed laughter. But beneath the ribbons and polished shoes, whispers moved like a second current, more precise and cutting than any blade. Into this atmosphere stepped the heroine, a woman who had learned to walk with quiet dignity even when she felt the weight of every eye upon her. She wore a gown modest in cut but carefully mended, evidence of financial strain disguised by a seamstress's steady hand. Her gloves were clean but thin from overuse, and she kept her chin lifted in the way people do when they have endured more disappointment than they will ever confess aloud. She had not meant to meet her former suitor here. Indeed, she had rehearsed the day to avoid him, choosing the earliest hour and the corner table furthest from chatter. But fate, mischievous and cruel as society itself, arranged otherwise. He arrived with a flourish of umbrellas and laughter, his new companions bright-eyed with gossip. When he saw her, his smile sharpened, as though he had been handed the very opportunity he desired. "My word," he murmured, approaching with a politeness too smooth to be anything but venom. "Still attending salons. I would have thought you'd retired from social prospects." She felt her breath falter, yet she answered with the restraint she had trained into her bones. "Good morning. I trust you are well." He dipped his head slightly, performing courtesy like an actor who knows the audience watches. "Quite well. Though I confess I am surprised to see you. One hears things, of course." He delivered the line with an airy indifference, loud enough for the nearest tables. "That no one intends to marry you now. But perhaps rumor is harsher than truth." Her teacup trembled. A soft gasp fluttered from a lady nearby. The room did what Victorian rooms always did in moments of cruelty. It grew silent while pretending not to listen. She steadied her cup and refused to lower her gaze. "People hear what they wish to hear." He smiled. "Indeed they do." With a dismissive tap of his gloved fingers against his coat, he turned back to his companions who tittered behind their fans. Not one person intervened. Not one kind glance reached her table. The world had neatly folded its judgment around her like an unwanted shroud. For several long seconds she could not swallow the bitterness that gathered in her throat. She had never desired grandeur or fortune. Only respect. Only a chance to belong somewhere without being measured like a commodity. She folded her gloves with precise calm, the only shield she possessed, and rose to leave as the rain intensified beyond the windows. Her chair scraped softly against the polished floor, a sound more accusing than anything her suitor had said. The street awaited her like a chill truth. Carriages splashed through puddles, and the scent of wet cobblestone mingled with coal smoke from distant chimneys. She stepped into the morning, refusing to let tears blur the city's harsh lines. Shame heated her skin, but beneath it, something else stirred, a fragile, aching defiance. She would not break. Not before him. Not before any of them. Her umbrella, frayed at the edges, strained against the wind as she walked down the narrow lane. People hurried past her without noticing. A pair of young women whispered about engagements. A merchant barked prices. A constable guided a stray dog from the street. Life continued with brutal indifference. Yet for her, every sound felt amplified, every movement sharpened, as though humiliation had cleansed the world of softness. She reached the end of the lane and paused to catch her breath. A carriage stood near the curb, a dark, imposing vehicle with silver trim dulled by raindrops. The horses stamped impatiently, releasing warm clouds into the cold air. Something about the stillness around it drew her attention. Other carriages rattled and splashed. This one waited with almost ceremonial patience. The door rested slightly ajar. A gloved hand, pale against the dark satin interior, pushed it open a fraction more. She froze. Her first thought was that someone inside required assistance, perhaps a frail elder or a lady unsteady from travel. But the figure who leaned forward was neither uncertain nor feeble. He possessed an air of absolute authority, the kind that required no words to make itself known. He was older than most men seen in salons or ballrooms, his hair silvered, his posture straight but touched by hints of past injury. Rain reflected against his polished cane, and his gaze, steady as candlelight in a cathedral, fixed upon her with an unsettling clarity. Not curiosity. Not judgment. Something else entirely. She had seen powerful men before, of course. London was full of peers who strutted like roosters in velvet coats. But this man did not strut. He observed. And in doing so, he seemed to strip away the noise of the city and see her not as the object of gossip, but as someone who existed in her own right. "Miss," he said, his voice calm, rich, and impossibly resonant. "You dropped something." Her breath caught. She had not felt anything fall. Yet when she looked down, a small folded handkerchief lay at her feet, embroidered with initials she did not recognize. She stooped to retrieve it, uncertain whether it was hers or his or meant for her at all. When she straightened, the man's gaze softened, not pity but recognition, as though he understood something about her that no one else had cared to notice. Before she could speak, before she could thank him or question him or even step away, he inclined his head with the barest nod of respect. A gesture far too deliberate, far too meaningful, to be accidental. The door closed with a quiet click. The carriage rolled forward, merging into the gray rain and disappearing as though swallowed by the city's breath. She stood rooted to the spot, handkerchief trembling in her palm. The embroidered letters formed a crest she had only seen printed in newspapers, above stories of influence, wealth, and unreachable power. Her humiliation still clung to her skin, but now it mingled with something else, something she dared not name. For the man in the carriage was no ordinary gentleman. He was a duke. And not just any duke. The most powerful one in England. The handkerchief lay upon her small writing desk long after she returned home, its embroidered crest a quiet, impossible beacon. She had placed it there deliberately, as though distance would lessen its meaning. Yet every time she crossed the room, her gaze drifted back to the silver-threaded initials, the unmistakable mark of the Duke of Ashford, a man spoken of with equal parts reverence and fear. She had never imagined he would know she existed, let alone offer her a gesture that felt almost deliberate. Rain continued through the afternoon, darkening the edges of the windows and muffling the sounds of the city beyond. She lit a single candle, its flicker soft against the fading daylight. Her thoughts drifted again to the Duke's face, not youthful, not gentle, but marked with a gravity that suggested long years of burden. His eyes had held neither condescension nor idle curiosity. They had held awareness and recognition, as though he had seen something in her humiliation that struck a chord deep within him. She shook her head, forcing the idea away. Men like him lived in distant worlds of marble halls and ancestral portraits. Women like her belonged to modest rooms and careful economies. Whatever his intention had been, it could not have concerned her in any meaningful way. Yet a quiet unease accompanied the thought, a tension that felt suspiciously like hope. By evening, a soft knock sounded at her door. She opened it to find a young footman standing beneath the lamplight, rain glistening on his coat. His posture was impeccable, his expression politely unreadable. "Miss," he said, offering a sealed envelope. "A message for you." Her breath stalled. "From whom?" "His Grace, the Duke of Ashford." For a moment, the corridor tilted. Her fingers, uncertain, accepted the envelope as though it were fragile. The footman bowed and retreated down the steps with disciplined grace, disappearing into the fog-touched street. She closed the door, leaning against it to steady herself. Her heart beat too loudly in the quiet house. She broke the seal with trembling hands. Inside lay a single sheet of thick, cream-colored paper, the Duke's handwriting surprisingly elegant for a man rumored to avoid correspondence whenever possible. "I trust the rain did not trouble you further. Should you have need of assistance, my household is at your disposal for the next 3 days. Ashford." It was not a romantic message. It was not even warm. Yet the restraint in the words felt intentional, as though he had written with the awareness that a single misstep might frighten her. She read the letter twice, then again, searching for hidden mockery, for a mistake in address, for any sign it had been misdelivered. But the name written at the top was hers, clear, precise, undeniable. Why would a duke concern himself with her welfare? Why offer help to someone who had nothing to offer in return? The thought frightened her more than the humiliation earlier that day. By the next morning, London society was already whispering. She felt their eyes on her as she entered the dressmaker's shop, drawn there by necessity, not desire. She had intended only to pick up alterations for her employer's niece, yet even before she crossed the threshold, she sensed the shift in atmosphere. Conversations dipped. Heads turned. Fans fluttered too quickly. Madame Ellery herself approached with a smile polished to perfection. "My dear, such a pleasure to see you." It was not concern in her eyes. It was curiosity, sharp, hungry curiosity. "Thank you," the heroine murmured, her voice steady despite the tightening in her chest. "Word travels so quickly," Madame continued lightly. "A carriage was seen outside your home last night. And then someone mentioned a letter. From Ashford House, no less." Heat rose to her cheeks. "It was merely a courtesy." "Ah," Madame breathed, as though this simple denial only deepened the intrigue. Even so, courtesies from a duke are not insignificant. A pair of women behind her exchanged knowing glances. One wonders, one of them whispered, what interest such a man could possibly take. The dressmaker's needles clicked like distant applause, sharp and relentless. The heroine felt each whisper settle upon her like a fresh layer of scrutiny. She had lived long enough with gossip to understand its patterns. No whisper began without consequence. And this whisper, this rumor tying her fate to a man of towering power, was the most dangerous of all. She collected the parcel swiftly and stepped outside, inhaling the cold air as though it could wash away the weight of attention. But the city no longer felt indifferent. It watched her now. Turning a corner, she nearly collided with the last person she wished to see, her former suitor. His expression twisted in surprise, then calculation. "So," he drawled, "the wind has shifted in your favor, has it? A duke this time? You do aim high." She steadied herself. "You misunderstand. There is nothing between us." "Is that what he says?" His smile sharpened. "Or what you hope he'll continue saying?" Her breath caught. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Be careful. Men like him do not rescue ruined women. They amuse themselves with them." She recoiled as though struck. He gave a mocking bow, then sauntered off, leaving her trembling with anger and something worse, fear that his words might contain a sliver of truth. But the moment she turned to continue her path, a shadow fell across the street. A carriage, sleek, dark, unmistakably familiar, approached with unhurried confidence. It stopped beside her, the horses exhaling warm mist into the cold air. The door opened with deliberate precision. A voice, deep and controlled, emerged from within. "Mississippi. I believe we must speak." She froze, her heart pounding so fiercely she feared it might betray her emotion. For there he was, the Duke of Ashford. And he was not offering a courtesy this time. He was summoning her. The interior of the Duke's carriage was dimly lit by a single lantern, its trembling flame casting warm shadows across the polished wood. She hesitated at the threshold, uncertain whether stepping inside would be a mistake from which she could not retreat. Yet the Duke's calm gaze, steady as an oak catching sunlight through fog, held no impatience, only the quiet expectation of a man accustomed to being obeyed, though not in a way that felt coercive. Rather, it felt like gravity itself had shifted to draw her nearer. She entered. The door closed with a muted thud, sealing them away from the murmurs of the street. For a few seconds neither spoke. The sound of the horses' hooves carried them forward, the city slipping past in streaks of rain and lamplight. She clasped her gloved hands in her lap, willing her breath to steady. "Thank you for agreeing to this conversation," he said at last, his voice low, resonant, and free of any affectation. "I realize my sudden presence may have caused you discomfort." "I was surprised," she admitted. "Your letter was most unexpected." He inclined his head. "Surprise was not my intention. I witnessed what occurred outside the tea salon yesterday. I could not, in good conscience, remain indifferent." Her heart contracted with a mixture of shame and gratitude. "It was a private humiliation, Your Grace." "There is no such thing in London," he replied softly. "Not for those society deems weak enough to wound." She looked away then, unable to meet the depth in his gaze. The carriage passed beneath a gas lamp, illuminating the faint lines carved by years of restraint around his eyes. He was older, significantly older, but there was nothing diminished about him. His presence filled the confined space with a quiet certainty. "I have no wish to burden you with my troubles," she murmured. "You are not a burden," he said immediately, the firmness in his tone startling her. "If anything, I fear I may impose. Society has already begun to speculate regarding our acquaintance." The admission sent heat rushing to her cheeks. "Then I should distance myself. I do not wish to damage your reputation." His mouth twitched, an almost smile, brief and unreadable. "My reputation, miss, has been unassailable for decades. I assure you, no whisper touches me unless I choose to let it." "But it touches me," she replied, softer. "And I cannot endure more scrutiny." He leaned forward slightly, the lantern's glow brushing the silver at his temples. "Which is why you and I must speak plainly." Her heart stuttered. "About what?" "About the fact that you were treated unjustly," he said, "and that I will not permit it to continue." She stared at him, astonished. "What? You do not even know me." "I know enough," he said. "I know what it is to be misjudged, to be spoken of rather than spoken to. And I know that strength seldom announces itself. It endures in silence." Her throat tightened. She had never heard anyone describe her resilience as anything but necessity. For a moment she feared she might betray herself with tears, but she steadied her breath. The carriage slowed as they approached Hyde Park. The Duke gestured toward the door. "Walk with me. Carriages attract attention." She stepped out into the cool air. Evening mist clung to the grass and wrapped the lampposts in ghostly halos. They walked side by side, separated by a respectable distance but bound by an undeniable current of unspoken connection. "Have you always lived in London?" he asked. "Since childhood," she answered. "My parents passed some years ago. I have managed, as best I can." "You work?" "Yes. Quietly but consistently." She hesitated. "Society does not view such efforts kindly." "I do," he said simply. The sincerity in his tone unsettled her more than cruelty ever could. It was easy to steel oneself against disdain, far harder to shield a heart from unexpected kindness. "You must understand," she began, choosing her words carefully, "a duke's attention is not something I can afford. Rumors are already growing. And my former suitor is beneath your notice," he interrupted, the edge in his voice as sharp as a drawn blade. His insult was an act of cowardice. He said men like you do not rescue ruined women. The Duke stopped walking. Slowly, deliberately, he turned to face her fully. His expression held no anger, only profound clarity. "I do not rescue women," he said. "I recognize them." A shiver rippled through her, as though the mist itself had entered her lungs. His words settled around her with the weight of something irrevocable. She attempted to regain composure. "Your Grace, people will think. I care nothing for their thoughts." "But I do," she whispered. "Because every whisper reaches me, not you." He exhaled, as though conceding a truth he wished were otherwise. "Then allow me to shield you. Not out of obligation but choice." Choice. The word struck her like a bell rung in an empty cathedral. "I cannot accept charity," she said gently. "This is not charity," he replied. "It is consideration." His restraint, his careful wording, only deepened her confusion. Why would a man of such power choose to align himself with someone as inconsequential as her? What did he gain from this? They resumed walking, though their thoughts lingered behind them. The path glistened with dew. An orchestra played faintly from a distant ballroom, its melody drifting across the park like a forgotten dream. "Miss," he said after a long pause, "I am prepared to make you an offer. One that may alter your circumstances, and silence every cruel whisper." She stopped breathing. "What are you suggesting?" He did not answer at once. Instead, he studied her with the gravity of a man weighing not her worth, but his own intentions. "I would ask something of you," he said at last. "Something serious, something binding. And I will only speak of it if you choose to hear it." Her pulse hammered in her ears. "What must I choose?" "To step into the carriage again," he said quietly. "If you do, I will tell you everything." The mist swirled around them, and for the first time in years she felt the fragile tremor of destiny stirring in her chest. She turned toward the waiting carriage, and took a single step forward. She stepped back into the carriage, the lantern inside flickering as though startled by her return. The Duke followed, closing the door with deliberate gentleness, and the vehicle rolled forward once more, its wheels gliding over the slick streets of London. For several breaths, silence filled the space, gentle, poised, and unbearably expectant. She sensed him choosing his words not out of hesitation, but out of respect for the gravity of what came next. "Miss," he began, his voice steady but lower than before, "I will speak plainly, for I believe you deserve nothing less. The scrutiny you endure will only intensify. Society, once it finds a whisper worth repeating, grows ravenous." She folded her hands in her lap, bracing for whatever truth he intended to unveil. "I am accustomed to whispers." "Accustomed," he echoed softly, "but not obligated to bear them alone." Her breath caught. "What do you mean?" He looked toward the lantern, its glow drawing warm reflections along the cut of his jaw and the silver in his hair. "I have lived many years in the quiet shadow of duty. My title commands respect, but it also imposes expectations I have never shared with anyone. Until now." Her heartbeat quickened. "Your Grace." He raised a hand, not to hush her, but to steady the moment. "If I extend my protection, if I place my name beside yours, no one, no former suitor, no covetous gossip, no cruel salon, will dare speak against you." The carriage jolted slightly as it crossed a cobblestone ridge. Her breath wavered. "Protection of that nature would require a sacrifice from you." "It would require a decision," he corrected. "And I make it willingly." Emotions she had long buried, Fear, longing, disbelief, rose like a tide she could not push back. "But why me?" she whispered. "You could choose any woman of status, wealth, or beauty." He regarded her, and for the first time, his expression held something almost raw. "Because none of them look at the world as you do. None of them carry dignity forged in silence. None of them remind me what it is to feel alive." Her breath faltered. He had spoken the last word with such restrained vulnerability that she felt it like a hand upon her heart. The Duke continued, more composed now. "What I propose is not a charity, nor a gesture of pity. It is a partnership, one that would serve us both. You would gain security and freedom from society's cruelty. And I would gain the presence of a woman who sees past pretense." The lantern's flame quivered, as though echoing the tremor that ran through her. She turned her gaze to the rain-blurred window, unable to bear the intensity of his eyes any longer. "And if I refuse?" she asked quietly. He did not hesitate. "Then I will respect your refusal. The carriage will take you home and I will trouble you no further. But I will not pretend that such a decision would be without consequence. Society has already woven your name with mine." She closed her eyes. The truth of it weighed heavily. She had done nothing, yet already the world prepared to judge her. The carriage slowed. She felt the shift of motion, the muffled clatter of distant hooves, the muted hush of lamplight against fog. When she opened her eyes, she saw they had reached a secluded lane bordering St. James's Park, far from the city's scrutiny. The Duke leaned back slightly, giving her space while anchoring the moment with his quiet presence. "I ask for no immediate answer. Only that you hear me." She drew a trembling breath. "Then speak." "I propose marriage," he said simply. The word landed like a thunderclap in her ribs. She gripped the edge of the seat, her pulse surging. "Marriage? To a duke? To this duke?" "You are shocked," he observed gently. "I am overwhelmed," she corrected, her voice barely a whisper. "I expect nothing else. But understand this, I do not seek a decorative wife, nor one who dances to society's expectations. If you choose this path, you will stand beside me, not behind." She swallowed hard. "But I would be the subject of endless speculation." "Only until the wedding," he replied. "After that, my name shields you entirely." "And your household?" she pressed, thinking of stern matrons and sharp-eyed relatives. "They will obey," he said, not with arrogance but with certainty. "I do not allow mistreatment under my roof." She studied him, his implacable posture, the traces of pain etched into his movements, the sincerity threaded through every word. He was a man carved by years, responsibilities, and loneliness. Yet he looked at her not as someone beneath him, but as someone essential. "Do you fear the scandal?" he asked softly. "Of course," she admitted. "But I fear insignificance more." He nodded. "Then perhaps we understand each other more than I imagined." The carriage rolled to a halt again, though the Duke made no move to open the door. Outside, faint music drifted across the park. Waltz steps carried from a nearby ballroom, murmured laughter filtering through the fog. It felt like a world she had been barred from her entire life. The Duke extended his hand, palm steady, offering neither command nor expectation. "If you accept," his voice lowered, each word deliberate, "your life will change tonight. If you decline, I will vanish from it entirely." Her fingers hovered inches above his. The air between them felt charged, like the breath before a vow, like a door poised between two futures. She thought of the humiliation she had suffered, of the whisper that no one would marry her, of the strength she had forged without witnesses. And she thought of him, this powerful, enigmatic man offering not pity but partnership. Her hand trembled toward his. But before she could touch him, the carriage door swung open with startling force, and a figure stepped into the lantern's glow. Her former suitor. Rain glistened on his coat as he glared inside. "I knew it," he spat. "You've trapped him. And I will not allow it." Her breath froze. The Duke did not move. But his eyes turned colder than winter steel. Rain poured behind him, streaking his coat and darkening his hair, but fury burned so fiercely in his expression that weather seemed a trivial opponent. Her former suitor stood at the open carriage door as though claiming a battlefield, breath heaving with the triumph of a man who believed he had caught a scandal in the making. She shrank instinctively, not out of guilt, but out of the shock of seeing malice take physical form. "You think I did not notice?" he hissed, glaring between her and the Duke. "That you could ensnare him with simpering looks and meek silence? You've trapped him, led him into a marriage he does not understand." The Duke did not flinch. He remained perfectly composed, though the tension in his jaw hinted at a storm far more dangerous than rain. "Leave," he said, his voice low, controlled, and lethal in its restraint. Her former suitor laughed, an ugly sound. "Leave? While you make a fool of yourself over a woman who offers nothing. Everyone knows her reputation. Everyone knows." Before he could finish, the Duke rose. Age had marked his body, but authority lent him height that eclipsed any weakness. "You will silence yourself," he said softly, "or I will do it for you." The suitor opened his mouth to retort, but something, perhaps the unmistakable steel in the Duke's gaze, halted the words. A flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. Still he pressed on, the desperation of wounded vanity urging him forward. "She used to beg for my approval," he spat. "And now she dares to pretend she is worthy of—" "She begged for nothing," the Duke interrupted. "You mistook her patience for interest, her dignity for invitation. When she refused you, you chose cruelty. That is not her shame. It is yours." A blush, harsh as a bruise, crept across the suitor's face. "You defend her?" he scoffed. "You, a duke, defend a woman no man would claim?" "I defend what I value," the Duke said, the words falling with the weight of a decree. "And I do not suffer insults to those I value." The breath caught in her throat. He had not spoken the proposal aloud again, nor asked for an answer, but in that moment, his meaning felt carved into the air between them. The suitor recoiled as though struck. Pride reared in him like a wild horse, and for a moment she feared he might lunge forward in some reckless act. But the Duke stepped closer, his cane angled with quiet warning. "You will leave this carriage," the Duke said, "and you will forget her name." "How convenient," the suitor sneered. "You speak as though she belongs to you." The Duke's voice dropped even lower. "She belongs to no man. But she may choose to stand beside one. And that choice will never again involve you." Silence thundered between them. At last the suitor choked out a bitter laugh. "London will devour the two of you. Do you imagine society will accept her? That they will overlook her insignificance, her poverty, her humiliations? You risk everything for a fantasy." The Duke did not blink. "The only fantasy," he said, "is your belief that society's approval is a measure of worth. I do not answer to them. And neither will she." With that, he placed a hand on the carriage door, not forcefully, but with the calm finality of a man accustomed to ending conversations. The suitor stepped back, drenched and trembling with outrage. "This will ruin you," he warned. "It will ruin nothing," the Duke replied. "But your presence ruins this evening. Good night." He shut the door. The carriage moved. For several breaths, the only sound was rain striking the roof in a relentless cadence. She sat motionless, her hands clasped before her, trembling, not from fear but from the overwhelming shift of the world. The Duke settled back into his seat, though a faint tremor of fatigue crossed his features. Defending her had cost him something. Not in reputation but in the emotional labor of battle. She found her voice slowly. "You shouldn't have confronted him." "Shouldn't I?" he said gently. "Would you have had me watch while he insulted you? I could have handled it." "I know you could," he replied. "But you should not have to." The warmth in his words melted the last remnants of doubt inside her. She studied him, not the Duke but the man. The man who had chosen to stand against ridicule on her behalf. The man who offered marriage not as salvation but as recognition. "Your Grace," she said softly, "you ask much of me." "I ask only for truth," he said. "Do you wish to stand at my side, or do you wish me to withdraw? I will abide by either decision." She looked down at her hands. For years she had carried herself quietly, surviving in the shadows of London's harsh judgment. She had become invisible, forgettable. But in the Duke's presence a strange thing happened. She was seen. Not as fragile. Not as pitiable. As valuable. The carriage lantern glowed like a hearth in winter, illuminating his steady gaze. Outside, the storm began to soften, though droplets still clung to the glass like unspoken questions. "I am afraid," she admitted. "Afraid of what society will say. Afraid of stepping into a world that is not mine." "Then let us be afraid together," he said. "Fear is no disgrace. But surrendering to it is." A breath escaped her, half sob, half laugh. "You speak as though this union is inevitable." He shook his head. "Nothing is inevitable. Only chosen. Chosen." The word wrapped itself around her heart like a warm cloak. She lifted her gaze, and for the first time since meeting him, she allowed herself to truly imagine the life he offered. A life not free of scrutiny but free of humiliation. A life where her dignity was not constantly eroded by small cruelties. A life where her presence mattered. "I do not know how to be a duchess," she whispered. "I will teach you," he said. "And you will teach me in turn how to live again." Emotion swelled in her chest, too large for the confines of her composure. Slowly, she extended her hand toward him, the hand she had hesitated to place in his earlier. This time she did not tremble out of fear, but out of the enormity of the decision. He took it gently, reverently, as though accepting not flesh but faith. The carriage rolled to a stop. Through the window, the gates of Ashford House rose like a cathedral carved from moonlight and history. Her new life stood before her. And somewhere behind, her former suitor watched the carriage vanish into the estate, unaware that the woman he mocked had just stepped into power he could never comprehend.